A black walnut, the kind that drops by the thousands every October across half of the United States, contains enough natural dye in its outer hull to color 2 pounds of wool a deep, permanent, light-fast brown. The husks are free. They are everywhere. Most Americans rake them into the trash without ever knowing what they are throwing away. Yellow onion skins, the papery layers your grandmother saved in a paper bag under the sink, produce a gold so rich and stable it was used to color silk garments worn by Egyptian pharaohs 4,000 years ago. The cost is zero. The skins are already in your kitchen: madder root, indigo leaves, goldenrod blossoms, sumac berries, walnut hulls, onion skins, oak galls, pokeweed, and a single rusted nail. With nothing but the plants growing within 50 feet of an American back door, you can dye every fabric in a home a permanent, fade-resistant color: brown, yellow, red, blue, black, pink, green, gold. This is not folk craft. It is not a hobby. It is not a trend. From the Bronze Age through the year 1900, this was how every fabric on earth was colored. Every robe in every culture, every flag in every army, every dress, every blanket, every coat, every shirt. Then, in the span of 50 years, a handful of German chemical companies erased 4,000 years of human knowledge and replaced it with petroleum. The American synthetic dye industry generates over $40 billion a year. The global textile dye and pigment market is over $12 billion on top of that. Every fabric in your home, every shirt in your closet, every set of sheets, every towel, every curtain, every couch cover was colored using chemicals derived from petroleum, coal tar, or industrial solvents, none of which existed before 1856. The average American household spends over $1,800 a year on clothing. Most of that clothing fades within 20 washes. Reds turn pink, blacks turn gray, navies turn slate. The fading is not a defect, it is a feature. The synthetic dye industry depends on garment failure to drive replacement. A shirt that holds its color for 30 years cannot be sold to the same person 3 times. Think about the bottles in your laundry room. Color-safe detergent, color restoring sprays, black restoring solutions, color catcher sheets, anti-fade pods. Every one of those products exists because the dyes on your clothing are unstable. Every one of them costs $10 to $15. Every one of them is solving a problem the dye industry created. A pair of black jeans, dyed with synthetic indigo and sulfur dyes in a Bangladeshi factory, will fade to charcoal gray in 18 months. A pair of jeans dyed with natural indigo, using the same process the Mayans used in 500 BC, will deepen and improve in color for 50 years. The first costs $40 and is replaced 4 times in a decade. The second costs the same to dye at home, with leaves from a garden, and is handed down to a grandchild. Over a 30-year period, the average household spends over $50,000 on clothing. A significant fraction of that spending is replacement, driven entirely by color failure. Color failure that did not exist for 4,000 years before petroleum dyes replaced plants. The plants are still here. They grow in every yard, every roadside, every forest edge in America. They cost nothing. They have not stopped working. The reason you do not know which leaf, which root, which hull produces which color is not because the knowledge stopped being true. It is because a $40 billion industry cannot exist if you do. In 1856, an 18-year-old British chemistry student named William Henry Perkin was attempting to synthesize quinine from coal tar. He failed. But the dark sludge left in his test tube produced a brilliant purple stain on a piece of silk he was using to clean his glassware. That accidental color became the first synthetic dye in human history. He named it mauvine. He patented it. And within a single decade, the entire global dye trade began to collapse. By 1870, German chemical firms, BASF, Bayer, Hoechst, and Agfa, had filed thousands of patents on coal tar-derived dyes. By 1900, those 4 companies controlled 90% of the world's commercial dye supply. The natural dye trade, which had supported farmers, weavers, and dyers in every culture on Earth for thousands of years, was systematically dismantled. Indigo plantations in India shut down. Madder fields in France went fallow. Cochineal harvesting in Mexico shrank to a fraction of its former scale. The transition was not gradual. It was engineered. German dye cartels offered synthetic dyes to textile mills at prices below the cost of natural production. Mills converted within a single business cycle. The farmers who had grown dye plants for generations were forced into other crops. The knowledge of which root, which leaf, which bark produced which color, knowledge that had been passed within families for centuries, became economically worthless within 20 years. In the United States, the home dyeing tradition survived longer. American farm wives continued dyeing wool, cotton, and linen with walnut hulls, onion skins, sumac, goldenrod, and indigo through the Great Depression. As late as 1940, almost every rural American household still had a dye pot. Then came the post-war textile boom. Between 1945 and 1960, the American clothing industry tripled in size. Synthetic fabrics, nylon, polyester, acrylic, replaced cotton and wool in millions of homes. Synthetic fibers cannot be dyed with plants. The chemistry does not work. The molecules are wrong. To dye polyester, you need petroleum. To dye nylon, you need acid dyes manufactured in a chemical plant. The fibers themselves were chosen, in part, because they locked consumers out of natural dyeing forever. By 1965, every home economics textbook in America had stopped teaching natural dyeing. The last Federal Extension Service publication on home dyeing with native plants was printed in 1948. The Department of Agriculture, which had distributed dyeing pamphlets to farm households for over 50 years, simply stopped. Not banned outright. Just never mentioned again in any home economics textbook written after 1960. Never referenced in any clothing care guide published after 1955. Never included in any commercial fabric product sold to a consumer in the second half of the 20th century. The system has 4 components: a natural fiber, a mordant, a dye plant, and heat. Every one of these is available for free or nearly free in any American town. Here is exactly what each one does, how it works, and how to use it. Component 1. The fiber. Natural plant dyes only bond permanently to natural fibers. Wool, silk, cotton, linen, and hemp all accept plant dyes. Polyester, nylon, acrylic, and rayon do not. Before you do anything, check the tag. If it says 100% cotton, wool, linen, silk, or hemp, the fabric is dyeable. If it says blend, the natural percentage will dye and the synthetic percentage will not, producing a softer color. Wool and silk, which are protein fibers, take dye most aggressively. Cotton and linen, which are cellulose fibers, need an extra step to bond properly. Most American clothing made before 1960 was natural fiber. Most clothing made today is blended. Component 2. The mordant. Asterisk. A mordant is a metallic salt that bonds the dye molecule to the fiber molecule. Without a mordant, plant dye will wash out within a few cycles. With a mordant, the color holds for decades. The traditional American Depression era mordant was alum. Aluminum potassium sulfate. It costs $3 to $4 a pound at any pharmacy or pickling supply store. 1 pound mordants over 30 pounds of fabric. That is roughly 10 cents per pound of fiber. For browns, blacks, and grays, an iron mordant produces deeper, darker tones. The traditional iron mordant was nothing more than a rusted nail or a piece of scrap iron soaked in vinegar and water for 2 weeks. The resulting liquid is called iron water. Iron water costs $0. Every American home has the materials. To mordant wool or silk, dissolve 4 tablespoons of alum in a gallon of warm water. Add the wet fabric. Simmer for 1 hour. Remove. The fabric is now ready to accept dye. For cotton and linen, the process is the same but requires an additional step, a tannin pre-treatment. Tannin comes for free from oak bark, sumac leaves, or strong black tea. Soak cotton in strong tea overnight, then mordant with alum. The fabric is then ready. Asterisk Component 3. The dye plant. Here are the 7 Depression-era dye sources that produce every major color, plus where to find them and what they yield. All of these are free. Every single one. For brown, use black walnut hulls. Gather the green or blackened outer hulls in October. 1 pound of hulls dyes 2 pounds of wool a deep, permanent walnut brown. No mordant required. Walnut tannin self-fixes. Black walnut trees grow across the eastern 2/3 of the United States. The hulls drop for free every autumn. For yellow and gold, use yellow onion skins. Save the papery layers from cooking. 1 ounce of dry onion skins dyes 1 pound of wool a clear, light-fast gold. The color is so stable it survived 4,000 years on Egyptian textiles. Most American kitchens generate enough onion skins in 2 months for a full sweater. For red, use madder root. Madder grows wild across most of North America and is sold cheaply by herbalists. 2 ounces of dried madder root, simmered at exactly 160 degrees Fahrenheit for an hour, never boiled, produces a deep brick red on alum mordanted wool. This is the same red used for British military coats from 1645 to 1885. For blue, use indigo. Indigo plants grow naturally from Virginia to Texas. The leaves are fermented in water for several days, then exposed to air, which oxidizes the dissolved compound into the famous deep blue. Every pair of jeans on Earth was originally dyed this way. The plant grows like a weed. For black, use walnut hulls combined with iron water. The iron darkens the brown into a true permanent black. This is how black wool was produced in every American household before 1940. For pink and rose, use pokeweed berries or avocado pits. 6 avocado pits, simmered in a gallon of water with alum-mordanted cotton, produce a soft, light, fast pink that does not fade. For green, dye yellow first with onion skins, then over-dye with indigo. Yellow plus blue produces every shade of green in nature. Asterisk component 4, the dye pot and the heat. The traditional American dye pot was a cast iron or stainless steel kettle held over a wood fire. A modern stainless steel stock pot on a kitchen stove works identically. Do not use an aluminum pot. The metal alters the color, and do not reuse the pot for cooking afterward. Dedicated pots cost $3 to $10 at any thrift store. The procedure is the same for every plant. Chop or crush the dye material. Cover with water. Simmer for 1 hour. Strain out the solids. Add the wet, mordanded fabric. Simmer for another hour. Turn off the heat. Let the fabric sit in the dye pot overnight as the bath cools. Rinse in cool water. Hang to dry. That is the entire process. 1 afternoon. 1 pot. Permanent color. The cost breakdown is devastating. Alum mordant. 10 cents per pound of fabric. Walnut hulls, onion skins, madder, indigo. 0 to 50 cents per pound of fabric. Total cost to dye an entire wool sweater. Under $1. Total cost to dye a pair of jeans, a set of curtains, a tablecloth, or a quilt. Pennies. A single bottle of commercial RIT dye costs $4 and dyes 1 garment. The synthetic color in that bottle will fade within 15 washes. The walnut brown in your dye pot will outlast the garment itself. One last note on color combinations. The full palette opens up when you over-dye. Yellow over blue produces forest green. Yellow over walnut produces olive. Madder red over indigo produces a deep purple, the same purple Roman senators wore. Iron water added to any color darkens and ages it. The yellow that produced bright gold becomes a deep antique brass. This is how every color in every garment, in every American home, was achieved for 3 centuries. Layering, combining, repeating. 1 dye pot used through the seasons produced an entire wardrobe of permanent color for a family of 6, for pennies, forever. Walk into any farmhouse in the Appalachian foothills in 1933. Walk into any rural home in Iowa, Kentucky, Vermont, or the Carolinas. There would be a dye pot on the back porch, a bag of walnut hulls drying in the rafters, a mason jar of iron water sitting in a corner cabinet, a coil of sumac twigs by the woodpile. The dyer was the wife. The teacher was her mother. The teacher's teacher was a grandmother, who learned it from a great-grandmother, who learned it from a colonial settler, who carried the knowledge across the Atlantic. From 1620 to 1940, 320 years of unbroken American household dyeing tradition. When a shirt faded, it was redyed. When a sheet stained, it was overdyed. When a child outgrew a dress, the fabric was undyed in lye, then redyed a new color, then sewn into something else. Nothing was discarded for color reasons. Nothing. The Egyptians dyed linen with madder, indigo, and saffron from 2500 BC. The Romans dyed wool with murex purple and weld yellow. The Chinese dyed silk with indigo and tea for over 4,000 years. Indigenous American peoples dyed cotton and yucca fiber with cochineal, sumac, and walnut for at least 3,000 years before European contact. The knowledge is older than every modern industry on Earth combined. Every culture, on every continent, in every century, dyed fabric with plants. Every culture. Except the one that lives downstream from a coal tar refinery in 1970 and beyond, the plants are still in your yard. The walnuts still drop in October. The onion skins still pile up in your kitchen. The madder still grows in roadside ditches. Nothing has changed, except that an entire civilization was talked out of using them. For under $3 in alum, with walnut hulls gathered from a single tree, with onion skins saved from a week of cooking, you can dye every natural fiber garment in your home a permanent, light-fast color that will outlast the fabric itself. Starting this weekend with 1 stock pot. The same way every American household colored fabric for 300 years, the complete system, including exact mordant ratios, plant identification charts, color recipes for every shade, and the fermented indigo vat method your great-grandmother used, is linked in the description below. It is part of the full Depression-era household manual. 100 formulas that replace every product in your home. Tomorrow, this channel will show you the $0 Depression-era stain method that saved every garment in every household, and why the dry cleaning industry has spent 80 years making sure you would never learn it. Every product in your home once had a $0 version. They buried it. Now you know.